You're about to watch a clip from the Videomaker Podcast. If you want to see the whole episode, click the link in the description. What is the best way to improve my next video? So we're missing some details here, which is like, what's your video look like now? Yeah. But I think that if this is a beginner or an intermediate, actually, I would say any intermediate or lower experience level, the two things that I always see that could almost always use improvement are audio and lighting.
Yeah. I think I always just think of the rudimentaries as something that everybody could benefit from, regardless if you're a professional or a beginner. Going back to those typical things of, if your audio is right, and I get back even one step further, is your camera level? Is your white balance set properly? Are you in sharp focus? Just those super rudimentary things, because if you do all of those things, it looks professional. If you can expose properly. So, now that's really broad. Expose properly and your video will look better. Well, of course. Yeah. But, you'd be amazed at how much your video is affected if you white balance just a little bit wrong. I know in this room here, most of the hard lights here are all 5000K, and all the rest are a bicolor light, and they're kind of between 5400 and like 4700. So even if I shoot my camera at 5000 Kelvin, I still end up having to change the white balance, and like sometimes you just can't make it look right again. Like if you're that far off, or it just takes a lot of thought. Whereas like if you just have the white balance right when you're shooting it, you don't have to adjust that, and right off the bat you're going to be working with with better footage than you would have if you would have had to change that in post. Yeah,
so that's particularly challenging when you're working in a situation where you have mixed color temperature. Yeah, it always happens. Always see it. Where there's like this indoor shot where someone's near a window, and you got the bright daylight coming in on one side, and then you've got like a warm incandescent on the other side, and there's nothing you can do to fix that.
Other than you can white balance on the windows and going really deep.
Well, I mean in post, but you could fix it when you're shooting, sure. But once you've recorded it, you can adjust the color either way. But then the window side is too blue, or the indoor side is too orange.
And you hope your subject doesn't cross over into the blue if you're having to do like a secondary grade on just the window or something like that. Those are the things. But like back to your point of lighting right, just a little bit of time thinking about the light and the audio, but that you're gonna get a far more dynamic shot. The same shot lit with a goal, and I always start with the goal of I want good 3-point lighting, and then I'm going to go from there to achieve my next thing. Now that's probably a slow process compared to like if you could just go, this is the way I want to see it, and place lights and that kind of thing. But what it helps me do is that I make sure to get the subject lit as well as possible, and then I can address how everything else looks so that at least my subject matter is lit the way it should. And that is a really big difference between having enough light to get the exposure properly and using your light to sculpt and to get an image to be more dynamic.
Yep. I really strongly believe that, if you're someone who you really want a new camera, the camera that you have is, you feel like it's holding you back, you're shooting with your smartphone even, and you just can't afford whatever the camera it is that you want, spend some time working on your lighting, because good lighting will make up for a crappy camera.
And by good lighting, we're not talking about, sure, it could be a really nice lamp. The light fixture itself could be this high TLC, CRI light.
I'm not talking about, about enough technique. Luminance. It's the technique and it's
of lighting.
It's the lighting design.
It's lighting placement, right? And the same thing is for audio is, mic placement is key for all audio sources. If we're talking on these microphones and we're 5 feet away from here, we'd have all sorts of room noise in here. And so we are using the mic properly. I'm sure you've seen a public event or something like that where someone just doesn't know how to use a microphone. Either it's like in their mouth, or it's so far away that,
or they're like waving it around.
Yeah, or they're like using it like a pointer and being like, why can't they hear me? It's like you don't understand how a microphone works. But hopefully we're not working with that kind of understanding. But that mic placement and its proximity to your sound source is so key to getting a clear audio. And the cool thing is there's starting to be technology in the audio world that takes away the gain, that you just don't need. There's no more gain. It has a AD converter for both the high and low end, and you're able to not have any digital clipping. That's rad. But if you didn't have good mic placement, who cares? It didn't clip, but it sounds like junk. You know, you didn't get distortion. Good on you. But I mean, as we had a podcast recently, and we were talking to a professional audio editor, and he kind of scoffed at the idea that someone would send him audio that was messed up. It's like these days, the boom operator, the guy that's people that are handling the audio, like, it's their only job to make sure that the proximity and the gain is set on all of their inputs, so that you're not having to deal with
they don't stick around if they're
you just don't have a job the next time if you do a bad job. But it's because the jobs are specialized. Whereas for me, I'm also the director, I'm also the cinematographer, and I'm having to place the boom operator and monitor the audio at the same time. So then, it's easy to make mistakes because you're just juggling too many things. But when you have a specialized focused job, that's really important. When I was working at the TV station, we always sent 2 people on a shoot, and one of the reasons was to help move things, just so you could get to one from the one thing to another. But the biggest help was having someone that can monitor the audio all the time. So
it's really hard to direct and listen to the audio levels.
Yeah, they're not paying attention to content. They're making sure the wind isn't causing an issue on that microphone. They're making sure that the input sounds good and has enough presence for what you're trying to achieve. You're actually paying attention to that. So it is really hard to balance all those things. Now, if you take enough time and have enough checklists, you can do it all. I mean, it's not like unobtainable. There's plenty of one-man crews that do that all the time, but you enter in more liability for those things to go wrong. But if your lighting is good, your lighting, meaning you're being deliberate with where you're placing your lights, trying to make the subject matter look as good as possible, and your audio is clean, the subject is present, whatever that subject matter is. The sound source can be a car, it could be a person talking, it doesn't really matter. And then just the rudimentaries, making sure your subject is in focus, making sure your white balance is on, making sure your tripod head is level. Those are things that, like, literally, I don't know how many times I've had to. I mean, and I've been shooting video for 15 years professionally, and I still sometimes forget to level the bubble, and I end up having to zoom into my shot a little bit and straighten it. Sometimes you just have a lot of stuff you're shooting, and there's this one shot, and you're like,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to check off the list when you're shooting, and it's common to make mistakes.
Totally, but the amount of correction you need to make is going to affect the quality of your video. So if you're having to do a lot of corrections in post-production, you're not going to be able to make that video that's best it could be if you just would have captured right at the origination of the video, the audio, and of course the color and the composition of your shot.
So my two easy tips here, assuming you have kind of the fundamentals down, is one, next time you're setting up your lights, or you're figuring out your lighting generally, is pay attention to what your backlight is doing. Yep. Usually putting a nice backlight in is like the difference between pro and amateur lighting, in my opinion.
That's like if you know a noob when there's no backlight.
Yep.
And the placement of that backlight, if it's good, because it's tricky. It's probably the most difficult light to place and to make sure it doesn't spill and all that kind of stuff. But if it looks right, you won't notice it, but it'll make all the differences.
Yep, and you can do this, if you're shooting outdoors, this is free. You just position the sun behind your subject. I hear a lot of, a lot of video teachers or photo teachers saying, don't, shoot into the sun. Well, you don't want the sun in the shot.
Yeah.
But the sun can provide a really nice rim light. And as long as you have a key and a fill, which usually comes from some sort of reflected source.
Yeah.
And you don't have like harsh shadows, so you shoot your subject under shade or under a diffuser. Then the sun is like a free backlight. So my other quick tip here is, if you're using a camera top microphone like a Rode VideoMic Pro or something, take that thing off of the camera and put it on a boom pole and just get it as close as possible to your subject.
Yeah, or any kind of, like boom pole, you could use a mic stand, you could tape it to a music stand. Getting the microphone closer to your subject is going to make the sound better. It's not the quality of the mic, it's its location to your subject.
Yep. Yeah, those camera top microphones are fine if you're like, shooting a vlog and it's, a foot or two away from your face, great. But, if you're shooting something like the distance between Chris and I, which is probably 6 feet, it's not going to sound that good.
Yeah,
so get it closer.
You're gonna have a lot more room noise to deal with, and some rooms sound really fine and they're dead, and that shouldn't be an issue. And you're just gonna have a little bit quieter, and they seem a little distant. But if you're in a racquetball court or indoor basketball court or something like that, you have hard surfaces everywhere. Yeah. It's gonna sound horrible. The further away you get from your subject, the more weirdness you're going to allow into that microphone. Yep. So, just keep the rudimentaries and, be deliberate about your mic placement and your light placement. And I think those things, if you thought of all those things while you're doing your next project and you hadn't really thought hard about them before, it's going to make a huge impact on your next video.
Yep. Actually, we have we got to find the link. I'll put the link in the description of this podcast. We have a video on the checklist for the things to do when you're setting up your camera right before you hit record.
Yeah.
And it's got all these things. And there's like a very difficult to remember acronym there.
It's like 15 letters or something.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but I'll put the link in.